Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu-alaikum. Ji ayanu, pakhair agale, ni hao, churashumme, washmale. Oh, hi, Gonzaimas. Guten Morgen. Hola, boyor, privyet, kaifa hal? Hale shuma chatore, ahlan wasalan, marhaba, buna, mucho, gracias, swabia, balli karaya, hosh galdin, anayo sayo, huya mora, adab. And thank you very much, everybody, for tuning into PTV World. You're certainly watching World this morning. We hope and pray that everybody out there is doing wonderfully well and that you're ready to kickstart your day with us. But ladies and gentlemen, right at the start of the week, this happens to be your host, Shahzad Hassan Khan. I genuinely pray for all of those amazing people who are out there, whether you're tuned into your television screens as of now or not. But certainly that's the kind of a heart which I would recommend that people really need to carry and have, you know, where we certainly do not have any hate, no matter what the case is, what the scenario is. In fact, I think that it is to burden your own self. You know, God forbid if you end up arguing with somebody and later on you realize and you keep on thinking about it as well, that's a lot of luggage to carry. So for all of those people out there, you know, the simplest and the most humblest recommendation and a suggestion to all of you is to have a cleaner heart. Make sure that you have a heart full of gratitude, and that's something which will take you quite a way in life. And that too, when we speak about a way, or when I say that, you know, it's going to take you away, that certainly I mean that it's going to have a positive impact in your life. You'll be a better person every single time. And please make sure that every time you're in competition, you are in competition with your own self and old self. So make sure that every single day you're better, you're more resilient, you're more thankful, and that you are more helpful for people around you as well. But without any further ado, let's get started. Let's take a good look at the top stories, what's happening inside the country, outside the country, in the field of sports. So let's get started with the show. First of all, may you all have a great week as well and a great Monday at work. So ladies and gentlemen, first up, obviously, the ambassador of the member countries of the OIC contact group on Kashmir met with the Foreign Secretary, Mr. Asad Majid. Those who met the Foreign Secretary include permanent representatives of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Republic of Turkey, Republic of Azerbaijan, and Republic of Niger. Issues of mutual concern as well as those concerning OIC were discussed during the meeting. And from OIC, ladies and gentlemen, now we are actually going to take you to NASA. There's an update about NASA, and always kind of gives me goosebumps whenever I study or read something about NASA as well. So the US Space Agency, NASA, is all set to bring home its Orion capsule. The spaceship, which has been on a 3-week journey around the moon, is targeting a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean of California. Uncrewed for this test flight, the capsule is expected to carry astronauts on its next outing. Assuming everything works as planned in the coming hours, the parachute-assisted drop into the sea should occur at about 1740 GMT. The exercise is part of NASA's activist program, a quest to take people back to the lunar surface later this decade. Fittingly, Sunday marks exactly 50 years since this feat was last achieved by the crew of Apollo 17. Well, that'll be quite an achievement. And I think that we really need to be kind of very aware of what sort of technology is around us and what sort of technology is being developed for the better human lives over here on this planet, what kind of research is undergoing. So this is our initiative of making you more aware of what's happening all over the globe. But now coming down to how Morocco fans, ladies and gentlemen, definitely has celebrated. You know, the FIFA fever is all over the world. May it be Pakistan, may it be any other country. Moroccans broke into celebration after their team beat Portugal 1-0 in the World Cup quarterfinals and made history as the first Arab African team to reach the semis. Congratulations to the Morocco fans as well, and the way they celebrated. Unfortunately, this was the last FIFA World Cup for Mr. Cristiano Ronaldo, and he couldn't really stop his tears because the team couldn't qualify if you speak about Portugal as well. But now I think it's about time that we get started with what are we talking about. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we've always spoken about how, you know, violence shouldn't be there, you know, in the first place. And, you know, when people get any sort of authority, what they do is, not everybody, but I know that, you know, for sure, there are a lot of people who misuse their authority. Not just that. But today we're going to speak in context of women. Now, when we speak about women, to me, since I've been raised by wonderful sisters, you know, 5 of them, alhamdulillah, so I've always had that warmth in my upbringing. You know, when I was being nurtured, I was being told how to treat women as well. And that too in particular, because I was raised by my sisters. They were elder than me quite a lot, and my mother, and they've always been really kind. And I seriously do not find any space whatsoever within my own personality where, you know, I can actually kind of bear that brunt of, you know, somebody being violent against women. And this is something which is very closer to my heart as well, because when your sisters get married, unfortunately, that's not something which you would like to do. You know, likewise, you know, so somebody you're marrying, you certainly do not want them to be, you know, under your aggression or violence. And, you know, why would you do that? Only if you would understand that this can happen to your sister or your mother too as well. So I think what we really need to talk about is that what are the concerted efforts which are being undertaken to make sure that we're going to end violence against women. We certainly need to know the figures, you know, globally. We need to talk about specifically Pakistan over here, because within the rural areas we do get domestic violence. There's a lot of abuse against women. And even though, you know, because whenever I speak about what feminism is, I really need to kind of say that, you know, my definition of feminism is that anybody who happens to be a feminist speaks equally about, you know, my rights and the rights of the women too. You know, so men and women, they would treat them equally, and everybody needs to get their right. But today what we're going to do is that just a day ago, ladies and gentlemen, the 16 days of activism against violence against women ended. It concluded. What was it? What is every woman treated? Because this is something which we really need to bring to you. We really need to kind of make sure that we make you aware of all of the aspects which different communities, organizations are working globally. So imagine when we talk about every woman treaty, ladies and gentlemen, there are more than 1,700 people working, 128 countries working together in making sure that they're going to end violence against women. And to do that, we're very lucky that we have a representative from Every Woman Treaty over here. We're going to ask her about, you know, the 16 days of activism to end violence against women. We're very lucky that we've been joined with somebody who happens to be a women rights activist. Ladies and gentlemen, she is Ms. Farwa Zafar. Hello, ma'am. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
So first things first, ma'am, I seriously need to tell you this, that one of my khala who lives in England, first of all, she resembles you quite a lot. The way you speak is exactly the way she speaks as well. So I can see my khala in you today as well. And it's wonderful to have you over here. But first things first, please make us aware about the global statistics on violence against women. And then we specifically would want you to, or request you to speak about Pakistani statistics as well.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today, and the topic is something that is very close to my heart, and I think it's a huge problem globally, and it's rising. You know, why we want to talk about it is because violence is on the rise. The pandemic has exacerbated this even further. And according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women are subjected to violence. And in Pakistan, the numbers are higher. I will share those also later. And also, domestic partner, you know, intimate partner violence is also something which is on the rise. And it's a national security issue. It is a national security issue because
why would you say that it's a national security issue?
It's a national security issue because many, aside from the manifestations of violence against women, especially in a country like Pakistan, it is manifested in honor killings, in rape, in emotional violence as well as physical violence, and it is a national security threat. It is you know, termed as that because we really, I feel that if nations fail, you know, if violence against women is not addressed and nations are not able to address that, so they cannot be achievers and progress.
I think because it's stretching it too far. I'm very sorry, but you know, with due respect, you know, terming violence against women, obviously, you know, I'm an advocate of that, but terming it as a national security threat, I think that's just stretching it too far. I mean,
well,
it is important, obviously.
No, it is because in armed conflict, which we see currently all around, there are many manifestations of violence against women due to that. And when you'll see in countries where there's more violence against women, there's more instability.
Well, for them it may be, it's not for us. That's the only thing which I'm saying. I think the coining this term won't be right.
Anyway, they are, according to the statistics you had asked, there are over 736 million women worldwide who are currently, that's the figure, who are subject to violence against women. And in some countries in Africa, it's much more in certain areas, and certain types of violence, because the description of violence is also, it varies from nation to nation, from continent to continent. So
what is the definition? Let's figure that out as well, so that, in fact, I think that, let's drop the idea of giving out the definitions, because then people will be like, okay, this does not come within this definition, so it's not violence. Violence is violence, may it be any form of it, ladies and gentlemen. Please make sure that we need to refrain ourselves. We need to keep our people safe from our tongue, our hands, and we really need to make sure that they are safer out there, rather than, God forbid, anybody having the fear of being subjected to violence. But ma'am, now let's come down to Pakistan. Obviously, we do know that it's a very important issue over here in Pakistan, and people, they do think that, God forbid, that they're allowed to do so. That's the way people have been raised in their families. Unfortunately, it's not just the men of the house or the intimate partner, but at times it's the mother of the intimate partner. We have seen a lot of mother-in-laws kind of manhandling their daughter-in-laws as well, and that's certainly something which you won't do to your daughter. And we really need to kind of raise awareness. First things, let's make people understand what is the Every Woman Treaty, because it came into being last November on the 16th of 2021. So please make us understand that, and what are the concerted efforts of all the 128 countries who are on board?
Yes, Every Woman Treaty is a global campaign to end violence against women. 2013 it was put together, and first 8 years, it was bringing it together, formative years, and in 2018 it made a public call for a campaign, and last year the first zero draft of the treaty was released, and since then we call for, our only mission is to have an international treaty to end violence against women, and that is around which we are working. For example, at the current time there are conventions, recommendations and resolutions on violence against women, but they are not binding. They are just recommendations. States cannot be held accountable. So that was the premise, that CEDAW, the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, it really doesn't specifically address violence. It's gender equality, it's very good, but it is now the international treaty will complement the CEDAW, because CEDAW doesn't hold states to bind. So therefore, and when CEDAW was put together in 1979, the map of violence was much different than it is now in the 21st century. So we need to come to the current times and to look at.
So we have gotten better? That's what you're trying to say?
No, we're not. I'm saying violence has taken much different shapes, and in those times violence was more like a private matter. It was not an open matter.
The women never spoke about it.
Yeah, and even now you don't have so many cases. And in Pakistan, for example, a survey that was released only last month in October shows that in 3 years, 2019 to 2021, you had over 60,000 cases, reported ones. The unreported ones are much higher, but this is just to get you a flavor.
I think
in
that's
3 years of crimes against gender crimes. And within that, you had rape, you had honor killings, and you had kidnappings, you had child marriages, you had, it's unending the list. And it's on the rise. Only when the pandemic started, violence got raised also. So it's known as a shadow pandemic.
Exactly. And in addition to that, for everybody who's out there, listen to me very careful, because when we sit over here, we sit with a huge responsibility on our shoulders, and that's the responsibility which the state lies on us. So imagine that every time we come over here, we need to make sure that we speak about all of those prevalent menaces within the society. Because once we start to talk about them, the second step is that we're going to accept it, and the third step would be that people would start to change the way they used to think about it. And I think that, getting to know that from 2019 to 2021, we had 60,000 reported cases, which means that there are a lot of people who are very well aware of their rights, and now they want to exercise their rights, which I believe is wonderful, and that's how things are going to change. But coming back to where you said that we want to hold countries accountable for the kind of violence which takes place within, and that's going to be, I believe, that's going to be a milestone which you're going to achieve, because once the state or the country is going to be responsible for the kind of violence taking place within the country, I think there'll be more steps taken to make sure that they're going to end violence as well. And do you see that happening in the coming years? Because the treaty is very young as of now. It's just only 1 year.
Yes, I very much think that if we continue, and we will achieve, because I'll give you the example, there are 3 other international treaties on tobacco, on landmines, and on torture.
Yep.
So you imagine there was a world when you went into the airplane, everyone is smoking and you're on, but now it isn't. So how did it happen? It happened the way we are passing through now at the early stage. It was not seen, and similar to landmines, similar to torture, this is how member states got on board, and smoking was.
Yeah.
So in the same way, only an international treaty, what we need to do is to stop the normalization of violence.
True.
Because it is accepted by society.
True.
And that is the one reason. And in a country like Pakistan, where we have a patriarchal system, misogynist mindset. So, but it can happen. We have a strong legal framework here, but the implementation is the issue. And your earlier question was, how will we hold them accountable?
True.
Like these 3 treaties I mentioned, they are also member states of the UN, and now there is a monitoring system, and through this treaty, you will have a legal aspect to it, legal framework, you will have prevention education, and then you will have training and accountability system and funding. For the landmines treaty, in the first 10 hours or 1 day, they got $500 million donation. If it catalyzes action for in many ways in terms of funding, and also it's so very important in terms of economic costs. We're losing like 5% of GDP to violence against women. It's trillions of dollars. It's trillions of dollars in lost productivity. I think in Pakistan, I read that around 80 million years of productivity is lost due to violence against women annually. 80 million, So it's something to reckon with.
Now I have a couple of questions. Okay, so we've given you fair time, and I think it's great. We both happen to be an advocate of ending violence, maybe against women, children, men, anybody. That's something which really needs to be the standard out there. So violence against anyone, maybe animals even, ladies and gentlemen, we really need to raise our voice over here. Now, a few things, that is that, when we speak about your treaty, the only recognition you've got is from the President of Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, and the former President of Colombia and Costa Rica. Yep. For such a bigger campaign where we want the entire world to end violence against maybe anyone, don't you think that the recognition really needs to come in from states which are further more developed than Congo, Nigeria, Colombia?
Of course we do, but these were states and countries, nations that felt immediately the response and then felt it's a need to take action. And we are working in each country because we have activist academics. They are already working, and we do have like 10 friendly nations, we call them, who are in the process of coming in board. Bigger countries like Canada, and there are other countries in Latin America, and we're getting endorsements to support the call. And in Pakistan, we are also trying to introduce this treaty and trying to do advocacy for
And we don't need any
Pakistan.
funds for that, do we?
No, you need, we are asking, the Every Woman Treaty seeks $4 billion annually. That's $1 per women.
What?
For they propose a plan to have a legal framework, protection services for
I mean, the countries,
women.
the responsible countries should be doing it anyways. I mean,
They're not doing it.
Why do we find so many ways of getting funds out there as well? I think
There are legal gaps. There
Yeah.
are gaps. That's why. So this treaty will fill those gaps. The legal framework is there, but not in all countries. And there are already some regional treaties, but they exclude 75% of the women.
I think even if we would require funds, where we definitely do require funds is where we need to come up with massive campaigns, where we really need to have women ambassadors out there, our athletes going, advocating people, being in conversation with them, and it's beautiful. And I like the initiatives you've taken as well. But very quickly, when we speak about the zero draft, which took place on the 16th of November 2021, what were the recommendations for the UN member states? It's just in my nature. Yeah.
The recommendations is that we need to end violence against women.
Yeah.
Why? Because we cannot prosper and progress as a nation.
True.
We cannot until we end violence against women.
True.
And there are so many manifestations of it. We are losing out. Nations cannot prosper. And when over half the countries, almost all countries' population, sometimes even more, are being subjected to violence,
Yes,
you are
yes.
losing out. And then the families, the communities, the children, their education, it's a domino
There's an
effect.
impact on it. And thank you very much for saying that it is indeed a domino effect. And when there are other children who are going to see that, God forbid, their mother's getting beaten by their father, I think they're going to grow up into being another woman beater as well. And that's something which we do not want. And that certainly is a domino effect. But very quickly, now keeping the Every Woman Treaty aside, I just want to have this conversation with Ms. Farwa, on our morning show. And what I need to ask you is, what do you think, if we speak about domestic violence specifically, what do you think are the reasons or the causes of this violence? Because to end something, we really need to get to the root.
Yes, I think starting point is that it's seen as it's normal. You're normalizing it, society accepts it. I think that even worse than the violence is the society's acceptance of
True.
it. It is not seen. So it's not a big deal. I mean, what is it? This is not violence if I shout, if I yell, if I, put them down, if I maybe beat them a bit, or emotional violence, and also physical violence. It's like, it's seen in country like Pakistan and many other countries, even more developed world countries face similar.
Do you think that it's a two-way traffic? So now I'm only in conversation with Ms. Farwa,
Yes,
right?
I'm talking
Yes.
on my behalf. Yes.
Yeah. So do you think that it's a two-way traffic whenever an argument happens, because it's always an argument which leads you towards probably violence or any sort of it, may it be emotional, because I believe that when it comes down to emotional violence, it's men who go through it more than women, and when it comes to physical violence, it's women who go through more than men. So and it is the opposite genders. And the other unfortunate thing and the irony over here is that imagine that a mother-in-law probably might be witnessing that violence taking place with her daughter-in-law and won't speak even after realizing that she's a woman herself. And that's something which I certainly do not get, because I think that the increase in violence, if it has taken place, is because of other women. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, but I've seen other women keeping their quiet and cool just when the other woman's been beaten.
Okay, no, very interesting comments, but I'll respond that yes, women also propagate violence against women, like mother-in-laws in countries like Pakistan. But I think it's part of a response that to be on the, it is seen as to support the male in the family, and
True.
also to subjugate. It's also more
Discriminatory
cultural,
behavior,
to subdue the daughter-in-law or the sister-in-law or whichever case it may be. Men also are
Subjected to a lot of pressure.
subjected to some, but the numbers are much, very no, we have this data that I was telling you, in which it was only in hundreds that this
Because we
found
never
for men.
spoke about it, and we really need to kind of speak
No,
about
I
it as
think,
well. There's a lot of
no,
emotional burden
but
on us.
because it is like that, but it is in Pakistan and other countries also. And the women are more subjected. It's not always two ways, as you have said. It is not always two ways. The woman is just ordered and round. She doesn't have the ability because of the
That's
social
true.
setup.
And I'm going to accept it. I'm going to accept it because, you know, the kind of conditions I live in might be very different from the people who actually, in mass majority, kind of experience, unfortunately, that violence. And that's true. But now what I say is that, you know, because I've, alhamdulillah, this is my 10th year, it's been a decade that I've been doing this morning show, and I've had people who've always been advocating about women, and that's wonderful. It's close to my heart. I've been raised by 5 sisters, alhamdulillah, and I seriously do understand that, God forbid, if there's any sort of violence against your sister, you would realize. Now, alhamdulillah, I'm blessed with 3 daughters as well, so I do understand. And for all of those people who are out there, rather than, you know, sending your daughter to somebody's place after their marriage, and then kind of telling her that, beta koi nahi, you know, even if your husband's beating you, you know, please make sure that you keep your cool and quiet. But in the recent times, we have seen that a lot of daughters have lost their lives as well. So we really do not want that to happen to our daughters or sisters. So obviously that's one point. But what I wanted to say was that I've hardly met anybody who spoke about how men go through that emotional violence which takes place, because emotionally women do, when we talk about the intimate partners, women do emotionally blackmail men as well. God forbid they do not have a job, you know, the pressure is on them, you don't do anything, and nobody speaks about it. It definitely does hurt their mental stability and the way they were thinking already.
You know, this violence and this whole equation it's about
Everyone.
the power. No, it's the
Okay.
power. It's the show of power. And your
the way you were grown
statements
up.
may be very random, but you know, they don't hold forth as a statistics, frankly. Maybe
True.
there may be some cases that you mentioned. I won't disagree with that, but that's about it. But generally, women are subjected
To violence, yes.
and yes, they do not have a choice. They cannot even choose whether they want to have a child or not child,
Yeah.
you know, whether they want to vote or not. I mean, violence, aside from the acute type, even in everyday life also. So
I think when it comes down to choosing, it has to be the two of them,
the
no?
women, there is no comparison between violence against men, as you has put forth, and violence against women. Violence against women is an issue which I feel the time is now, the time is ripe, and the time is right. And that is where we need to focus our attention, because we will only be doing a service to the entire community. Ending violence doesn't only make life better for women, it makes life better for men, for children, for family, for community, for nation. And there are so many other examples that show you how this is possible. But the other point I wanted to just raise is that violence is preventable.
Yes,
it
it
has
is.
been proved in America when they passed the Violence Against Women Act, and about 10 years later they had a 53% reduction in violence against women in the United States. And in Uganda also they passed some laws, and after that they had
But 40% increase in divorce rate as
50%.
well. So, I mean, we're glad that you actually spoke about all of it as well, and we are all hard for it, and we advocate it as well. And thank you very much for putting in that effort. And obviously, people from different walks of life need to come together, because violence is violence. Violence does not know any gender. And ladies and gentlemen, the violence really needs to end. This world over here is not going to be forever. And we really need to make sure that we make peace, we disseminate information which is going to help people, and that we are all about love as well. But thank you very much, Ms. Farba.
Thank you. And you can see that there's so many high profile cases only in the last 1-2 years only in Islamabad.
Those
even.
are the cases which are being highlighted. You know, there are so many other
that's what
cases
I'm saying.
as well.
You're not, and you know the conviction rate is not even 2%.
I'm very sorry, because we short on time. We
Right,
certainly
right.
will have you again over here on the show and speak about conviction, because what happens is that people withdraw their cases as well. We need to head out towards a short break, but one quick thing for everybody who's out there: God forbid, if you anticipate that you're in an argument which might end up you getting beaten or any sort of violence, please make sure that you there and then think about it wisely, and then you can come back stronger the other day or 2 days later or 3 days later when you know that you are at a safer place. So having that, impulsive response to somebody's odd words, or, somebody abused you, or somebody, anything, on the road, there's so many things which can happen in life. Please make sure that you take that moment to sit back, relax, think about it, whether you're in a stronger position or a weaker position. First of all, you need to make sure that you're not the one who's actually kind of doing violence to somebody else. Number two, if you think, you feel, you realize that, God forbid, this situation can turn ugly, please make sure that you use your brain very wisely in that given time frame, because that's the time when we panic, that's the time when we take wrong decisions. Sit down, relax, go back home, talk to your father, siblings, anybody. Take that advice, come back stronger, and then let's see what's going to happen as well. But please make sure that you are safe in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, we're heading out towards a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Good morning. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you very much for staying tuned to PTV World. You're watching World This Morning. The name happens to be Shahzad Hassan Khan. Ladies and gentlemen, this part of my life where, alhamdulillah, I'm blessed to actually get this opportunity every single day of my life, that I get to see newer people, that I get to ask them a lot of questions, that I get to kind of justify the kind of questions or mind-boggling things I have in my mind about people, and then I form opinions. And it has always helped me, because every single day when you get to see somebody, when you ask them questions about their life lessons, there's so much that you learn about. And it might even take you decades or 5 years or 6 years time to kind of learn that, if you were to do it by yourself. But today, it's going to be very interesting, because whenever I get a call that said, we want to interview you, I think that's the day when I get a little anxious. That's the day when I think, okay, what's going to happen today? And eventually when I end up on the show, I kind of, ask so many questions from the anchor themselves, that I seriously do not realize whether I was the guest or the host as well. So such is the situation over here inside the studios with me, a very young, bright mind over here inside the studios, who not just kind of interviews the most popular celebrities in the country, but kind of speaks about, where our economy is going. And, these are the young brains who are really going to kind of give us that precedence where people need to ask questions. Because we're not asking a lot of questions as a nation, and that's something where I think a lot of research comes in. That's something which I believe that a lot of education comes in, and these are the areas which needs to be highlighted. So such is an example of Mr. Haider Riffat, who happens to be over here inside the studios with me. Hello Haider, assalamu alaikum, good morning, how are you?
Walaikum salam, Shahzad. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's always wonderful to have you, and it's always nice to actually kind of learn from people, whether younger or older. And I've seen your videos on YouTube, you're everywhere, alhamdulillah. So may it be Sanam Jung, may it be any minister, may it be any journalist, you have not left anybody behind. 6 seasons are already out there. What do you have in your mind in the first place when you're going somewhere for an interview? So today you're giving an interview, but usually you go to take an interview. What do you have in your mind? How do you prepare yourself for the people who are out there?
First of all, thank you once again. I think the main thing is preparation. You have to do that beforehand. If you're not prepared, and sometimes it might surprise you also, if you do not go prepared, you might ask these questions that you never knew that you were gonna ask, So it goes both ways, but normally it takes a lot of prep work, a lot of writing down the questions, thinking about what you really want to ask, instead of just going down a more monotonous way of, asking about their life and stuff like that. So it's more about making the conversation constructive and holding the conversation.
Exactly. And thank you very much for saying that, because that's exactly the way I do it. So at times what I would do is that I would study about the subject I'm going to discuss, but not the person or the question as well, because then I feel that, okay, because I know it, what's the point of asking them? And we at times do not even ask those questions which we thought we knew, So what happens is that while we were on air, we've had that conversation. We're like, okay, I don't think it's important, but it's important for a lot of people out there. That's one way of doing it, and it's wonderful. But then the second part comes in where you're like, okay, because I'm making videos for YouTube and all of those interviews will be on YouTube, I really need to kind of touch base where a lot of people will have interest. So, and that usually comes by asking a lot of personal questions from somebody, from their life, which they're not really very interested or keen to talk about. For example, if I'm going to give my example, I have so many cricketers that I interview on daily basis. And, not every time you're going to perform very well on the ground or while you're on the pitch as well. So they really do not like it to talk about their performances where they didn't do well. So how do you kind of bring in that element where the viewer will actually be very interested in the kind of conversation Haider is going to conduct with his guests?
And Shahzad, the thing is, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? So I think if you frame it in a way that really grabs their attention and they also feel interested to answer, I think that's the key strategy that you should opt for. And I think everybody should opt for in terms of asking the right questions. But also, the other thing is, I think it's more about also asking questions that are unexpected. If you ask questions that are really standard, one way,
everybody's doing
then it's going to be the same way. That's not going to, you're not going to have your own identity as a journalist,
That's
so
true.
you need to hold the conversation, get the conversation going, and also ask follow-up questions if they left on a point that was really interesting. So maybe build on that a little, And
exactly.
that's
And then at times, we're so short with time as well, and then the duration. So we really at times, this is something which we feel you might not even feel as a viewer. And then it hurts as well. So, for me, if my God forbid show does not go well, my entire day does not go well. That's something which always kills me, it hurts me, and I'm like, okay, no, I need to do better tomorrow so that I can have a better day. I think it's wonderful. But when you interview people, you take away a lot of learnings, So one of your interview where, who did you meet, and do you think that and you think yourself that, it has had a very positive impact on your life? Who was that one gentleman or lady you interviewed, and what did they say that which is still with you?
I think there are a lot of interviews where I take away a lot of things from other people because they have so many stories to share, and we only get to see them in the public eye. But what they are as people behind the scenes, you don't get to see that a lot. So there are many. I think Maya Ali's interview was really emotional, where she got talking about her father and like how she lost how she lost her father. Ali Zafar was a really philosophical person during the interview.
Sufi.
And his interview was really good. And it's, for me, I feel like you do not need to have celebrity power to have a strong conversation.
True.
You can have the best conversation with the people who are not in front of the camera too.
Exactly.
So I feel like those are the conversations, and unfortunately we rely too much on celebrity power to conduct interviews and to have those conversations, and it has become really TRP based, ratings based. But most important constructive conversations come from people who are in the academia or who are working in the labor force, who are working day and night trying to, and they have a story to share.
But
and
when
their stories deserve limelight.
Well, when you get most of the views for the people you've interviewed, may it be Sanam Jung, may it be Mikal Zulfikar, may it be Kashif Abbasi, Meher Bukhari, Salim Safi, Mushahid Hussain, how could you disagree with what you said?
I mean, I agree
I'm
with
sorry,
you.
I'm sorry for this one.
Yes.
But yes,
that's
that's the unexpected part of it.
That's the unexpected part of it. Thank you for putting me on the hot seat. But the thing is, Shahzad, when I was starting my show, I needed a start because you need to build an audience.
True.
And for that, you need to rely on famous people.
True.
Right? But along the way, I did get to interact with a lot of the transgender community where I was talking about addressing their issues, their personal stories. So a lot of my work is also rooted in narrative storytelling,
And socio-economical issues as well.
Yeah, socio-political issues, and alhamdulillah 7 seasons, which is really good. Unfortunately, I could not continue because I'm in the US doing my master's there. So
why didn't you do it over there, yaar?
I mean, I don't get time.
Keep up with it.
It's
Get people on Zoom, just don't stop.
Yeah, I mean, I have a plan of having a Hawaii chapter too, where I am currently. So hopefully,
be in conversation with your professors,
yes,
teachers, something for the kids to learn too as well. We have a youth bulge over here, and we really need people to kind of think the way you are thinking.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful. I've got you covered over here from the hot seat. But now coming down to, would you advise the younger generations to do what you're doing?
I would, if their heart and their mind is invested in something like this.
Okay.
But if they want to pursue a passion that is aside from this, then they should definitely follow that. Follow what you really want to do in life. Don't follow what other people say, because your creativity is going to be. Oftentimes, Shahzad, the thing is, people rely too much on the outside voice.
True,
you know,
true,
they do not listen to their own voice. I feel like they need to listen to their own voice, and if they have the right resources, I just had a camera. I didn't even have a team to work with.
Kept on going.
It was just me, and I knew that I had to make that effort. I had to edit, produce, host, write
Everything.
the whole 7 seasons, and I did that. Alhamdulillah. It has gotten tiring to some point, but you have to keep going, and you have to follow your heart. Listen to your own voice. Don't listen to what other people say, because that's only going to diminish your creativity.
Exactly. Thank you very much for saying that, because in addition to that, ladies and gentlemen, when I started my career going back 13 years, I think somewhere around 2009 or 8, I hope that it's 13 or 14 years, alhamdulillah. You know, that was the time when people used to tell me, just be yourself in front of the camera. And I was like, yeah, what do they actually mean by being myself? I mean, I couldn't just get it, you know, so I was on top of my energy, you know, I would push, I would shout, I would do things which would actually get the interest of the audiences out there. And then, I think 5 or 6 years later, I realized what they meant by saying that you really need to be true to yourself and just be yourself in front of the camera. That meant that the kind of personality you have,
Yes.
the kind of character you have, the things which you say wrong, you need to say wrong on television. Does not really matter who's sitting in front of you. If you think that's wrong, it needs to be wrong. It can't be the other way around. You shouldn't be shadowed by other people and other towering personalities, because that's the kind of character you were raised with. That's the kind of personality you were raised with. So please make sure that you just, as soon as you're in front of the camera, that you all of a sudden change your personality, because that character takes you somewhere. You know, all of those people who are out there are very wise people, Haider, these days, and they understand the kind of personality you carry, the traits you have, and that's what makes them watch you.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what I want people to understand, that it's not always the kind of performances we put up, it's the personality they focus on. And please make sure that you know, because every time you're on TV, you're representing the way your parents have actually invested their time in you as well. So what's your take on this one? So how do you make sure that whatever you are at the back of the camera, you are too in front of the camera as well?
So I think it's all about bringing personality, like you said, and it's also about asking the right questions.
True.
I feel like if you're not asking the right questions, you're not doing the right job. So you need to make sure that you go there prepared. Just be yourself, and don't be afraid of asking questions, because I feel like we come from a place where, like, we are told not to ask this question. It's all about framing the question in a way that makes the other person want to respond to your question too, because you don't want to offend somebody. You don't want to make them angry. You need to ask. You need to.
You're the host, yeah.
Yeah, you need to frame your questions in a way, and unfortunately, I think that's not being done. We're not asking the right questions, and that needs to be our. We are journalists. That's our job. That's what we need to do. If we're not doing that, what are we doing? You know.
Exactly.
So
we really need to ask questions, and questions which when the answers come out, they will certainly have a very positive impact on people who are actually listening to that as well. But thank you very much, Haider.
Thank you, Shahzad.
And what more can we expect from your YouTube channels and your ventures on YouTube and interviews in coming days?
Well, right now I'm because I've taken a break from the Haider Riffat show, I'm actually doing a podcast series with the University of Hawaii Cancer Center, where I'm working. So I'm interviewing cancer researchers about their cutting-edge research in reducing the burden of cancer in Hawaii and the Pacific. So that's kind of like a health podcast that I'm doing with them. Season 1 has already been done. It was on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Facebook. Now I'm gradually, as I head back, I'm going to start working on a season 2, hopefully. So
I think that's wonderful, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you
Lovely
so
to be in
much.
conversation. Whenever you are back, please do let us know. We would certainly want to take a peek into your life as well, and
Thank you so
then
much.
grab those lessons with which we can actually make our lives better. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in. This is it for today. Till the next time, look after yourselves. 1, 2, 3. Good morning.